Hello everybody, my name is Michael Kensack. You can call me Jack for the purposes of this class. I'll say more about that in a minute. And the course you've found yourself in is English 345, Linguistic Perspectives on English, I believe is the title. That is not, however, how most people know this class. No, this is a course in the history of the English language, and the acronym for that is HEL, so I would like to wish you a warm welcome to hell! I'm sorry, was that uncomfortable? Maybe you'll prefer the other acronym for history of the English language. Hey, welcome to my hotel room. All right, if you're thoroughly creeped out, let's begin with a small quiz. Find a place to write down answers to 5 questions. This will be a small test of your factual knowledge about some foreign languages. Please don't look up the answers or worry about the grades. This is ungraded. I just want to know how much you all know about modern languages. So will you please write down which language is on the following slides. Number 1, l'état, c'est moi. Number 2, ich bin ein Berliner. Or maybe I should say, ich bin ein Berliner. Number 3, me gustan los sacapuntas. Number 4, en arche en hologos, kai hologos en prostontheon, kai theos en hologos. And number 5, nu schulon herian, heovon riches weart, meo todes meachta, and is modjethank. Will you please pause the video at this point, open up your email program, and shoot me an email, put the word quiz in the subject line, and just send me 1 through 5 which languages you think those are. I'm assuming at this point you've sent me that email. So on we go. Here, by the way, are the answers. L'état, c'est moi. That is, of course, French. Who said it? Any history buffs out there? Louis XIV, Louis XIV, known as the Sun King, consolidated power. In France, it means the state, l'état, the state, c'est. It is moi. I am the state. I am France. Number 2, ich bin ein Berliner. Why am I saying it like that? Because that's my best Boston accent while speaking German. German is the language. This is a famous quote by John F. Kennedy. He said it in Berlin, and there's actually a funny story about this. He was in Berlin giving a foreign address where he was very well loved, very popular, well received, just as Barack Obama was 50 years later when he also spoke in Berlin. Kennedy made a slight mistake, though. He was doing kind of word-for-word translation, maybe using some high school German, and he was trying to say, I am a Berliner. That's how you say it. I'm a person from Berlin. The problem is the ein, the a, the indefinite article. German doesn't use that a there. They don't say, I am a Berliner. They say, I am Berliner. It's just the way the grammar of the language works. The only way you can construe that sentence as stated, ich bin ein Berliner, is to refer to a certain pastry called a Berliner. So if you are a Berliner, you're essentially a jelly donut. So there's Kennedy telling the Germans, I am in fact a jelly donut. Moving on, we have me gustan los sacapuntas. No one said this. It's just my cobbling together of a few favorite terms from Spanish. I'm sort of the language nerd around campus, and the language I have least of that I've studied would be Spanish, unfortunately. So all of you, I'm sure, have more Spanish than I do. I, however, love the word sacapuntas, and I believe this means something like these pencil sharpeners are tasty to me. And the picture of Cookie Monster there is just to prove that you can, in fact, find an image of anything at all on the internet. On to number 4. En arche en hologos, kai hologos en prostontheon. This is Greek. This is Koine Greek. That is the way you refer to biblical Greek. These are the first words of the book of the Gospel of John. They say, in the beginning, arche, like archaic, was the logos. Logos means word. It's the root of our word logic. And the word was with God, and the word was God. I'm a Christian myself, and this is actually my sort of life verse. I found my career, my calling in this verse. I think it's my life's work to meditate on what it means that God is a word, that language and communication are an attribute of God. And if you are a Christian, I invite you to contemplate what that means as we go through this course together. The picture there is of St. Jerome. Jerome translated the Bible into Latin in the 5th century, giving us the Vulgate. All right, up to number 5. In the past, I've gotten some interesting responses for this. I've gotten Swedish, which is in fact not far off, Danish, Scandinavian languages like that. Is it Norwegian? Is it Dutch? Some people have thought it was Klingon or Vulcan or something like that. No. In fact, the answer is this is English. In fact, it's Old English. English from its very beginning. In fact, English began about 1,500 years ago when it split off from the German language. We'll be telling that story later. And what these words are the first bit of English that got written down, the first full sentence that got written down. We'll look at them later. They say, nu schulan herjan. Nu is now, schulan is shall. Herjan is a word we have lost in English. Words go away just as they come into our language. Herjan means praise. Heo von riches weard. You notice the F makes a V sound. That shows you it's heaven. Heaven, reach. Reach is like Reich, German for kingdom. Hitler had one. Now shall we praise the heaven kingdom's warden. That's a term for God. This is a Christian line. Another name for God, meotodes meachta. That second word is might. The might of the measurer. They're calling God the measurer. And his mod yethunk. Mod means, it's our word mood, but back then it meant mind, and thunk is thought. So now we shall praise the heaven kingdom's guardian or warden, the measurer's might, and the thoughts of his minds. That's the first bit of Old English, which we can also refer to as Anglo-Saxon, which got written down in about the 6th or 7th century. This course you have found yourself in is a course on English and how it got that way, how we moved from Nuushulan Herjan to the language I'm speaking right now. This is also a course on all those other languages and how they evolved from a single ancestor, despite the fact that they look almost incomprehensibly different, and you would never guess that they were cousins if they all showed up at a family reunion picnic. Well, I want to start our class by having a word story. That's something you will be creating during the course, and I want to start by doing one for you. Some of you might have noticed that students who have had linguistics with me call me Jack. So I'll explain why that is in this, our first word story. One of my favorite authors is C.S. Lewis. The man was truly remarkable, and I've followed him throughout my life. When I was a child, I read the Narnia books. When I was grown, I read the Perelandria, the science fiction outer space novels. When I was a college student, I read Mere Christianity, the Screwtape Letters, the Great Divorce, his works on Christian theology. I even followed him when I became a graduate student, and I realized that he did what I do for a living. He was a medievalist at Oxford in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and at this point I read his philology, his works on Paradise Lost, on Beowulf. I read his works of philology. Philology, by the way, means it's basically word love. Just like Philadelphia is brotherly love, philology is word love. It refers to the study of literature which is informed by the study of words. Altogether, C.S. Lewis wrote about 60 books. I have not read nearly all of them, but I admire him enormously. C.S. Lewis. Anyone know what his first and middle names were? His full name was Clive Staples Lewis. And I think he felt about the name Clive, well, about the way that we probably think about the name Clive. That it's a little stuffy, a little distant, a little ivory tower. So he decided he wanted to be called Jack. For a man who wrote masterworks in theology, in philosophy, philology, who basically invented the genre of children's literature, who wrote in science fiction. He never lost touch with the average person on the street, as busy as he was. I've read that he took time to answer every letter personally that he ever received, and that ran into the tens of thousands. And it's this accessibility that I find in his nickname, Jack. And I like Jack as a name for the following reasons. Jack is an incredibly common first name, especially if you take into account all of its variants. In English, the name Jack has long been considered a nickname for John, another extremely common name. Well, Jack and its variant of Jake, and the feminine form Jackie and Jacqueline, are all related to and come from the French version, Jacques, J-A-Q-U-E-S. And French Jacques descends, as very many French words do, from Latin, because French comes from Latin. French is just late Latin, where the name was Jacobus. That would be spelled with an I, not a J, because Latin didn't have a J. And the word probably has a Hebrew origin earlier than that. You know Jacob in the Old Testament, which would have been Jacob or Yaakov. The French name Jacques must have been a fairly common name also in Shakespeare's time, because he actually puts two people by that name into the play As You Like It. It's very confusing. And here's a fun side note about the name Jacques. In Shakespeare's England, here we're about 1600 AD, the British would have pronounced it not French as Jacques, but sort of anglicized as Jaques or Jakes. And I know if you speak French just how that strikes your ear. And maybe that was the point to begin with. Disrespect was likely on the Brits' mind because Jakes could also mean toilet. Since about the 15th century, both the word John and Jack or Jake or Jakes have meant a bathroom facility, which is what makes this picture so much fun and why people line up in front of them to have their picture taken. Well, Jack also shows up in a number of phrases in English. For example, we open boxes with a jackknife. We pulverize asphalt with a jackhammer. If you're a woodworker, we smooth wooden boards with a jack plane. I do that in my basement wood shop. We carve faces into a jack-o'-lantern. If you win money, you're hitting the jackpot. People in the UK fly the Union Jack or the Union flag. And if we steal a plane, which I sincerely hope we don't do, we're hijacking it. We even eat jack cheese or Colby Jack. So a semantic question, a meaning question. Jack is a name, but also a term and a compounded term. What does it mean? What is sort of the lowest common denominator that connects all of these Jacks? And what does it have to do with Clive Staples? Well, it seems to me that the lowest common denominator of all the Jacks is that Jack is the lowest common denominator. Jack as a word signifies the common, the average, the undifferentiated, the not very special. Let's look back through our examples. A jackknife is any old knife. It's not a Bowie knife. It's not a Ginsu knife. A jack plane has a kind of middling length. It's not a block plane for fine work or a jointer plane for smoothing. How about a jack-o'-lantern? Could be carved to look like anyone. So there's the word. And at its heart is the idea of the jack of all trades, the undifferentiated person with an undifferentiated task. He can do everything, kind of like C.S. Lewis. It's there in all of our words. What is jack cheese? Well, compared to brie or blue or camembert or heck, even cheddar, it just really has no flavor or characteristics at all. Can I get an amen? Anyone can hit a jackpot. Any British one can fly the Union Jack. Anyone can hijack a plane. Again, please don't do that. In other words, not to know Jack is not to know anything at all. In fact, around the time of Chaucer, this would be about 1400, Jack became a kind of catch-all generic nickname for a guy, a bloke, a fellow. It could be a familiar term, hey Jack, to someone you don't know, or it could be contemptuous, hey Jack. It was applied to sailors who were called jack tars. And when those sailors came ashore on shore leave, maybe they acted recklessly, maybe got drunk in high spirits, they were called jack-ashores. Just in general, jacks ashore. In about 1800, there is even a term, everyman jack, which is basically redundant. This jack as just any old person idea explains forms like jack of all trades, and it explains why there are jacks in so many folk tales, nursery rhymes. Jack Sprat, the lean one. There was originally his opposite, Jack Waite. Yep. There's Jack and the Beanstalk. There's little Jack Horner. There's even Jack Frost, who was Old Man Winter. That also explains all the male animal names with Jack in them. The Jack Rabbit, the Jackdaw, the Jackass. So when Clive Staples came down from the ivory tower and walked among us, he was not Clive, the Oxford Don, professor of medieval and Renaissance literature, author of dozens of books in genres unnumbered. He was Jack the common guy, the average Joe, the average Tom, Dick, and Harry, which, by the way, used to be Tom, Jack, and Harry. He was the mere Christian. He bodied forth this idea of a man of the people who had not risen above being just an ordinary fellow. He was a Renaissance man and a jack of all trades. And so, as my linguistics students this semester, in deference to Clive Staples, you may call me Jack.